I believe you are quite aware the situation has changed since last we spoke.
The truth is still the truth, and a bargain is still a bargain.
And Mayor Cermak is now deceased.
Yes. What does that have to do with our contract?
I do not recall signing a contract with you, Mr. Allan.
We had a verbal agreement. I'm sure my uncle here will attest to that.
Nathan, please. You're being most rude.
But Dawes reacted just as I knew he would.
Lewis, as a family man, I quite understand your position. As for you, young Mr. Heller, you should not have spoken to the papers of this. It was a breach of confidence.
Nothing was said of our arrangement being a confidential one. Besides which, I was in fact discreet.
How so?
I didn't tell the reporters why I was offered the job at the fair. Void our deal, sir, and I'm going to be put into an embarrassing light. I will have to inform the press of your involvement.
This reeks of blackmail, young man.
It reeks of business. Our arrangement is binding in my view, and if you feel differently, I'll be noisy about it.
Nathan.
I'm not a big wheel like you, General, but us little wheels can get good and goddamn squeaky when we don't get our grease.
My secretary will have contracts ready for you to sign this afternoon at 4. Please return and sign them. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Observations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
I've heard it said before, like, it was a very smart man named Robert Meyer Burnett who said the currency of our current age is authenticity. And it's so true.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your collector friend, your evangelist of the imagination, and, of course, the perhaps never to be defined existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett. And I'm Robcasting you from right here in the Robservatory. You imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is, of course, Robservations episode number 1021. I know it's a late-night show, kind of a last-minute thing. But you know what? It is called Robservation. Sometimes I just want to observe and report, you know? That's what I want to do. And I got to thinking, so I come home from doing the John Campea show today. I made a sandwich, and one of my favorite things to do, it was storming, raining. I mean, it's March. It's usually not as cold as it is in California right now. On March 13th, it's a little warmer. Spring is in the air. Definitely not the last couple days. So I came in, went into the movie room, sat down on our big, giant, fluffy couches, and of course, then the dogs encircle me, and they lie all over me, and it's very kind of warm and cozy, and especially on a rainy, stormy day. And I clicked on Netflix to see, like, well, what was on, you know? Just, I didn't want to go get a disc, and once the dogs situate themselves on me, it's hard to get up again, go get a disc, they follow you, I call it the parade. So anyway, the parade happens, and then it's like, it's a pain in the ass. It's a whole process. So I just clicked on Netflix to see what was on, and you know what was on? You know what dropped on Netflix? Runaway Jury. 2003's Runaway Jury, based on a John Grisham novel. Interestingly enough, the novel was about big tobacco. But because of Michael Mann's The Insider, they changed it and made it the court case is a gun case. And it is a really, first of all, star-studded. You got Dustin Hoffman and Gene Hackman, two old friends, and they share a scene together. I think it's the only time they ever appeared together on screen. John Cusack, Rachel Weisz, Jeremy Piven. It's a star-studded cast, and it was directed by Gary Fleeter. And Gary Fleeter was somebody who came on my radar when he did the first Alex Cross adaptation, Kiss the Girls, with Morgan Freeman playing Alex Cross, that came to the screen. And I liked Kiss the Girls. You know, I did. And if you look, he did a movie called Imposter, an alien invasion movie with people like Gary Sinise. He had a pretty good career. But he only directed movies from sort of the later 90s. For about 10 years, he made movies. I think The Express was like the last feature he made. after he made Runaway Jury. Then he went back into TV. There's so many directors. I would call them journeyman directors, although I think Gary Fleeter had kind of an interesting style of his own. It was showy TV, but I still enjoyed what he did. His first feature was, I believe, I didn't look at the IMDb, Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead, which was, kind of in the wake of Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, that spate of Quentin Tarantino inspired movies, Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead. I remember it being pretty good. I haven't seen it in a long time. I think Kino Lorber sent me the Blu-ray, but I haven't watched it yet. So I'm watching this movie. I put it on, hadn't seen it in a while, and the first thing that came up in the credits that surprised me was, I just forgotten this, is that Rick Cleveland, a screenwriter who's actually been on this channel, who's written me, interacted with me quite a bit, had him on to speak. He was one of the credited writers on the film. So shout out to Rick Cleveland. I sent him a email. I said, "Hey man, just watched Runaway Jury." But as I was watching it, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, this was a John Grisham adaptation. John Grisham, big Time to Kill, The Firm. Grisham had the kind of lock on that. And he, in the wake of, I love legal thrillers. Legal thrillers are catnip to me. I've talked a lot about how one of my favorite movies is The Verdict. I loved 12 Angry Men. I just love legal dramas because, like good cop movies, they set up, there is an inherent good versus evil, and then there's a case that there's going to be a winner or a loser. And I've just found courtroom dramas to be always compelling. Which is it was fun for me in True Noir, Chapter 7. There's a little bit of a courtroom back and forth, and Curtis Armstrong, who played Booger in Revenge of the Nerds, plays an attorney in there, a prosecuting attorney, and I had fun doing a little courtroom drama. I've always wanted to make a courtroom drama. I have a movie that I want to make set in 1999. I've written the screenplay for that is based on a novel that it turns on a court case. And so I'm watching this movie, Runaway Jury, and, shot in New Orleans, made really good use of the various neighborhoods there, and like the St. Charles Avenue streetcar or whatever. And I hadn't seen this movie in a long time. And I even own it. And I haven't watched it in a long time. I own it. I'm watching this and I'm thinking to myself, God, I was really just enjoying the whole thing. I was enjoying seeing movie stars acting. I was enjoying seeing the subterfuge, and I was enjoying the story as it unfolded. It's a little longer than 2 hours. Really well made. Christopher Young did the score. Really nicely shot. And I was watching it and I was thinking, this was a studio movie, and all of my favorite legal dramas, audio dramas. Got audio on the brain. I'm doing a sound mix tomorrow, mixing up chapter 8. And I just love them. And no one's making legal thrillers anymore. I mean, they just don't. Because why would you? A movie that I dearly love, Presumed Innocent, great legal thriller, was turned into a David Kelly streaming series. And I've often joked, John Grisham books today, they would bypass theaters entirely, and they would just wind up as streaming shows. Sorry, I was eating popcorn earlier. And that's what would happen. But as I was watching the movie, I was thoroughly enjoying it, with the dogs laying all over me and the thunder was going on outside. Eventually it turned into a hailstorm, and I'm really just enjoying watching this film. And I realized it's this paradigm. It's what a movie is. The 3-act structure, the 90 minutes to 2 hour normally, that whole thing. And I started thinking about what Quentin Tarantino was talking about on Joe Rogan. I don't know, a couple months back. He was on with Roger Avery, and he was talking about why he loves films as opposed to streaming. And basically he says, when you're watching a streaming show, even the best streaming shows are kind of like a soap opera, that you're caught up in the machinations of the characters and everything. And a recent show that I enjoyed was Paradise, 8 episodes. But here's the thing. It was the unfolding plot and story that I was interested in. And when it's over, when a streaming show is over, and I'm not saying that streaming shows aren't great. Like Tarantino said, there's a lot of great, beautifully made stuff. I mean, we've seen HBO series setting up that prestige bar with things like The Sopranos, you know, which had ongoing storylines, obviously Game of Thrones. And we have great stories like Breaking Bad. And there's all kinds of great television that are being made today. But here's the thing. Like Tarantino said, you're watching this story, and when it's over, I can't tell you half the things that I watched. I've watched entire streaming shows. I'm enjoying watching Reacher Season 3. You know, another episode dropped midnight last night. I've been enjoying watching it. I watch it. I like the machinations. I like watching Alan Richardson be Reacher and all that, and you watch the story unfold, and when it's over, it doesn't stay with me. It doesn't, I mean, I enjoy it. And I guess, you know, I've bought TV series and I go back and watch them again. Like some TV series, let me get to the difference for me at least. Like Tarantino was saying, they are in fact like soap operas. You're caught up in the story, and the story, if it's certainly well executed. But once it's over, like I remember, I loved The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. I love all the actors. I love all the characters. And I'm watching it, and I enjoyed it while it's on. I think back, and I have a feeling about what Mrs. Maisel was like to watch. And maybe I can remember a few exchanges here and there. I mean, I like the fact that Lenny Bruce was a character. But it doesn't resonate with me. Like I enjoyed watching it, and then it's gone. It goes in through the transom of my mind, and it goes out the other side. Movies aren't like that. And I started, as I'm watching Runaway Jury today, I'm thinking to myself, I'm really enjoying this movie. And I'm really enjoying, the plot's great. But what I was loving watching was the characters and the interplay and the performances and like what they were saying and the plot. I'm watching the plot unfold. You want the plot to be good, but my focus is on the people. And I really started thinking about what Tarantino was saying, and I was thinking about the fact that everybody talks about streaming. Now, movies are coming out, but movies used to be talked about like we talked about them. They were part of the cultural landscape. And maybe part of that was because everybody watched the same kind of movies. But when, for instance, I remember when Fatal Attraction came out, you know, it caused a lot of cultural discussion, op-ed sections of newspapers. Remember those kids? People were talking about what went on in that movie. And the things about Fatal Attraction, like you might remember of course, Alex put a rabbit, boiled the rabbit and all that. You remember that stuff. But what you remember is the characters. You remember Glenn Close saying, "I won't be ignored, Dan." You know, you remember lines of dialogue and you remember interplay. You're alone this weekend. That's also obvious. I mean, I can remember things from that movie. It came out in the late 80s. And I've seen it a lot, but I haven't seen it like as many times as I've seen Star Wars or Empire Strikes Back. But it had, I mean, you go back and you revisit that movie. Like, I remember there's an opening scene in Fatal Attraction when Anne Archer, exquisite in that movie. And she's so beautiful. And she's like sitting at her vanity, like brushing her hair. And I just remember that image of her. And she's an incredibly beautiful woman, but she's, you know, excessively beautiful. Like you could chat her up. I mean, she's totally naturally beautiful, but she had this incredible beauty. And I remember it was just like a single shot. You're kind of looking down at her and she's brushing her. They're getting ready or whatever. And I'm just thinking, wow. And the thing that I love about movies, like some of my favorite movies that I will revisit over and over and over and over again, like All That Jazz, Joe Gideon, Roy Scheider's character, Joe Gideon. The plot's fine. It's really interesting. But what I love when I watch these movies over and over again are watching the characters and the dialogue and you know, it's the people. And it's the people that exist in that 2-hour paradigm. Criterion just released Michael Mann's Thief on 4K. Thief is one of my favorite movies. I saw it with my grandfather right before my 14th birthday in Palm Springs in 1981 when it came out. It still has the most shocking line of profanity in it. Well, not really. Racial epithets and profanity in the same sentence. And Robert Prosky says it, and I remember sitting next to my conservative grandfather. I've never forgotten that line of dialogue. I will not repeat it here on the live stream. It has something to do with what Robert Prosky is going to have happen to Tuesday Weld if James Caan doesn't make things right with him. But it was one of the most shocking things I've ever heard. I love that movie. And whenever I watch that movie, it's not necessarily for the plot. It's to watch Michael Mann put James Caan's character through his paces. And all of my favorite movies and all the movies that I always go back and revisit, like, look, yes, I collect exploitation movies and horror movies and science fiction movies, but those aren't the movies that I find myself returning to over and over and over and over and over again. Cameron Crowe's the 1-2 punch of Jerry Maguire and, of course, one of my favorite films of all time, Almost Famous. Those two movies are chock-a-block full of humanity. And, I mean, it's not just Tom Cruise's narration at the beginning of Jerry Maguire talking about what a sports agent does. I could listen to that over and over and over again. And the thing that I find that I love so much about movies are the people. Whereas when I'm watching streaming shows, it's about the plot. And the thing is, plot, to me, when it comes right down to it, what's more important, the characters or the plot? Obviously, you want to have a good story. You do. You want to have a good story. But at the end of the day, I will watch My Fucking Dinner with Andre. Two dudes sitting at a table talking. I watch Avengers Age of Ultron, and one of my favorite scenes in Avengers Age of Ultron is when they're all sitting around talking about Thor's hammer and everybody tries to pick it up. Just a bunch of superheroes talking. I've often said, I used to say this on Collider Heroes after Age of Ultron came out, that I would watch My Dinner with the Avengers movie, where they're all not like in real life, you're talking to Scarlett Johansson, but like it would be fascinating to make a movie. I don't know who would write this or who would see it, but you have all the Avengers going to dinner and it's a 2-hour movie and they're talking about what's it like to be them. Like, what's it like to be them? What's it like for Thor, an Asgardian, to interact with Hawkeye and Black Widow? Like, how does he feel about it? And I honestly believe if you made that movie and somebody was great, somebody who was great with character, and you had somebody like a Steve Zalian or Robert Bolt or I don't know, take your pick, writing that movie, you could make a 2-hour My Dinner with the Avengers movie and people would watch it because it would be all character. And whatever the interaction is, I mean, those moments, the Avengers movies, I think, have more character bits. The reason I love returning to those movies as much as I do is when you get all those characters together and how they interact, how they talk to each other. There's all kinds of great character moments in those Avengers movies that I think people forget about. That's why I enjoy watching Infinity. I've watched Infinity War and Endgame way more than I've watched Avengers or Age of Ultron. And nowadays, it seems like people are cutting up movies, I guess because they're trying to get the younger generation to watch them. For whatever reason in my feeds, The Aviator, Martin Scorsese's The Aviator, which is a movie I love. I love The Aviator. Why? Because it's about making movies. It's about half of it's about Hollywood, and it's about airplanes. I love that movie. I love Leonardo DiCaprio as Howard Hughes. I love everybody in that. So many people are in that movie. You forget how many people are actually in that movie. But clips will just show up, and it's all character interaction. It has nothing to do with plot. These things show up, and I find myself clicking down. I have probably seen 30 or 40 clips. I probably watched 40 minutes, that means, of The Aviator in the last 3 or 4 days. I don't know why all of a sudden it's in my feed, but it is. And I just keep scrolling to find more Aviator clips. Even though I own that movie, it's right over there. And still, those clips are just people talking. It's great actors. I mean, Kate Blanchett's playing Katharine Hepburn. And just, the whole thing is great. And that's the difference between movies and streaming shows. Streaming shows are great, but I don't remember them. And the paradigm of film is what I remember. And as I'm watching Runaway Jury today, is Runaway Jury the greatest movie in the world? No. But it's a great example of a high-end, beautifully constructed, beautifully acted, beautifully written, beautifully scored, very nicely photographed, based on a John Grisham novel. I'd call it a great meat and potatoes film. But it was fun because of all the characters. I mean, I was forgetting, like, what's going on. I mean, the plot's pretty great. It's Byzantine, but it's great. You understand what's going on, but I was just enjoying watching, like, John Cusack. I forgot Jennifer Beals is one of the jurors in that film. She's got, like, 3 lines of dialogue. She's, like, in the background. I keep wondering, was she someone's friend and they asked her to be in the movie? You know, is it Bill Nunn who's in it's got a great bunch of actors. You're like, oh, it's that guy. You know, and I'm watching this and I'm thinking, I miss this. I mean, my favorite movie that I've seen in a theater this year is Companion. And Companion had a great, I really thought I don't want to talk about the plot, was great. But I just enjoyed the interplay. All the characters how they were interacting and the way they were talking to each other. It's basically a movie set in one house, one location, though they do get outside. I love Companion. Now, is Companion, remember, when I talk about liking things at scale, it was like a $10 million movie. Companion is a movie that was entirely let down by its marketing. That film deserved so much better, and I don't know, you know, as a New Line movie, it literally reminded me of New Line movies from the late 80s, movies like Jack Shoulder's The Hidden. It was a great time at the movies, and everybody I've talked to who's rediscovered it. Now, I'm not saying it's Lawrence of fucking Arabia. I haven't been saying that. What I have been saying is that was a really satisfying time at the movies because the plot was great, but it's all character. And that's the thing that movies do way better than streaming. They just do. Now, I'm not saying, like, did I love the scene watching Matt Murdock and Wilson Fisk talking in that diner, which was obviously evocative of Heat? I did, but and I'm not saying that there aren't individual scenes that are between characters that aren't great, because there's a lot of stuff, but really they're about plot. They're about moving the story along. And you've got all these different characters, and like Quentin Tarantino was saying, it's the soap opera of it all. But I don't, look, I love Mad Men. I think Mad Men is an example. I think Mad Men's one of the greatest TV shows ever made. And the cast is incredible. Everything about Mad Men is incredible. The writing, the look of it all. It's I don't even know how that series got greenlit. Well, I want to make a movie about, you know, ad men in the 60s. You know, really? I don't know how that got greenlit. Probably wouldn't get greenlit today, but it's one of the greatest TV series of all time. That show, the plots are fine. And it does have a very soap operatic nature to it. But really, that show succeeds because it's great fucking conversations. Like, it's all dialogue and characters. And if you'll notice, one of the things that I'm doing now is I've had the great joy of directing Max Allan Collins' great script, his 300-page script broken into 10 chapters. It's all talking. I mean, there's action scenes, and they're fun. But you heard the clip I played at the top of the show from episode 7, where you have the great William Sadler, Bill Sadler, who you might remember from playing Death in Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, or the villain in Die Hard 2, or he was obviously one of the inmates in Shawshank Prison, or if you're a Star Trek fan, he was Sloan from Section 31. He also was Wilson Wyler Kincannon from the movie I produced that Dave Parker directed called The Hills Run Red. One of my favorite actors. I guess you'd call him a character actor. He's in Trespass. But he's just a great actor. And you listen to Michael Rosenbaum and him, and then Bill Smitrovich chiming in. Great actors all. They're just talking. And it's compelling. It's compelling. And that's what I miss. And I think about the studio output and how I was shaped. The reason that movies were so important to me was they were not escapist. I was looking at movies, I was doing research about what it meant to be a human being, to grow up, to live on this planet at this point in time where I happen to be living here in the United States. I looked at movies because, as I've always said, one of my favorite sayings is the best fiction is the most truthful. And I believe that. I think the best fiction is the most truthful. And I think great fiction has a lot of insight into how we should lead our lives. And when I was a kid, like when I was 12 years old and saw all that jazz for the first time, I was blown away by it. There's so much going on in that movie. It works as a great fantasy film. It works as a great examination of an artist's life. You get insight into the movie making process, what it means to be a choreographer, what it means to sit in an edit bay. There's so much in that. And then, of course, Joe Gideon loves women, but he loves all women. And it has some of the greatest dialogue ever. And Allan Himes' work, that's why I wanted to become an editor. And I that movie is one of my, in my mind, top 10 films of all time, all that jazz for me, if you haven't seen it. It's funny because a lot of my favorite movies start with the letter A. All About Eve, Amelie, All That Jazz, Almost Famous, even Alien. I don't know what it is about the letter A. I feel like I'm limited. I'm gonna make a list of my 10, 20 favorite movies, and I can't even get out of Apocalypse Now. I can't even get out of the A's. I don't know what that says about me, but it's tough. Please don't ask me if I was on the red carpet for some event, what are your 4 favorite movies? I'd be like, fuck off. No, I wouldn't say that. I'd be very polite and nice. But it's just, I'm thinking about how, and something else happened. I don't know if any of you have seen that AI Star Wars 4 short. It's all done with AI. The guy who made it took him like 3 months. Arnold Schwarzenegger's in it. I'm watching this and I'm like, it is, it's AI. I'm not saying, but now we just take AI stuff for granted. Like, it's just AI. It's astonishing when you're looking at it. And you think this is the worst AI is going to be. In a year or two, everybody, all of you, through prompts or whatever, you're all going to be making your own movies. And they're all going to be spit out on a daily basis. Now, I don't know. The real question is, will those movies have heart? Well, that Star Wars 4, it made me laugh. There was authorship behind it. It's a philosophical question that I think it's going to take people. I don't know. I don't know if what I'm talking about right now, which is actors playing fictional people but making me believe in those people, that's what I truly love about cinema. I truly love the experience of watching human beings go through the folly that is our lives. Lives of quiet desperation, whatever they are. And while I like horror movies, the thing about horror movies is they kind of are, they work on a different level. I think one of the reasons that I grew up loving Cronenberg and Carpenter movies is if, you watch David Cronenberg films or you watch John Carpenter movies. Like I watched The Brood and Dr. Hal Raglan, Oliver Reed starts talking about psychoplasmic. So there's stuff going on. It's all about, the horror elements are cool, but it's more like the weird, like subverting the human experience that Cronenberg does. Or in John Carpenter movies, if you think about early Carpenter films, not so much Halloween, but if you think about Dark Star, Assault on Precinct 13, The Fog, Escape from New York, The Thing, all of those movies have really rich characters. I find Carpenter movies, Starman, Christine, Big Trouble in Little China, even Prince of Darkness, I can go back and revisit Carpenter films because they're chock-a-block full of rich characterization. A lot of the time, horror movies are about the plot or when the creature, you're waiting for somebody to kill or something. And in Carpenter movies, those things happen. But, I think about the characters. Which one of you men put your dirty drawers in the kitchen trash can? I can hear lines of dialogue from these movies, and that's when I think about The Thing, when I think about the Thing, I don't think about Rob Bottin's great special effects. I think about David Clennon talking to Keith David going, childs, they're falling out of the skies like flies, man. They practically own South America. I think about that shit, and that movie came out in 1982. Yes, I've probably seen it a lot more times than I care to admit. But I hope that movies now, studio movies, because of the economics, they can't make movies like that anymore. They have to make big IP, spectacle-driven movies. And the problem is most of those are fantastical, and by definition, they're removed from the human experience. you're dealing with fantasy. So there isn't a lot of grounded stuff happening. And then the things that we see that do have grounded things happening, I mean, I think that's why I liked Anora as much as I did. People are, it's a movie about sex workers. I mean, it's about people. And you're watching people in real places doing real things. And yeah, you still have a plot and you still have a situation unfolding, but it's really about watching those people interact. And that's why I fell in love with movies and characters and language and dialogue. And I don't get that. And I'm not saying that streaming is bad. That's not what I'm saying. Streaming just doesn't resonate with me as much because the whole, like when you're watching a streaming show, like over 8 episodes or 10 episodes or 13 episodes or something, like I love Andor, and look, Luthen's speech. I'm paraphrasing, fighting for a sunset I'll never see. The thing about Andor is it had character moments that none of the other Star Wars shows have that I'm interested in. That speech Luthen gives is one of the single greatest bits of dialogue in all of Star Wars. And I mean, a lot of people, I know you want Jedi Knights and all that, but I watch Ahsoka and I'm like bored. I can't remember one exchange of dialogue. There's nothing in those shows that I'm interested in. When you think about Star Wars, there's all kinds of dialogue snippets. She'll die before she'll tell you anything. I mean, I don't know. Do you think a princess and a guy no. I mean, the part of Star Wars is, yes, it's this incredible spectacle and it's amazing to watch and all that, but you still love those characters. You've never heard of the Millennium Falcon? It's the ship that made the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs. She's fast enough for you, old man. What's the cargo? I mean, it's you remember that because the characters were so good. I was going to go to Tosche Station and pick up some power converters. You remember dialogue from that movie. Yeah, the space battles are cool, but if you watch Star Wars, it was those characters. Until this battle station is fully operational, we are vulnerable. The Rebel Alliance is too well equipped. I mean, it's just... Don't be too proud of this technological terror you've constructed. I mean, that's what you remember. And that's what... Did you hear that? They've shut down the main reactor. I mean, it's all character. And the reason people loved Star Wars is because everybody you meet was a character. R2-D2 is a character, and you don't even know what he's saying. But you get it. You kind of understand. Chewbacca. You understand what he's saying, too. When he puts his hands behind his head and leans back. When he's playing chess, 3-dimensional chess. What is that? I forget the name of the name. I can't remember. I remember the trash compactor's name is a Dianoga. But, and Filgrin Dan and the modal nodes. I can't remember everything. I'm old. But I'm just saying that streaming shows are never going to permeate, and maybe it's a generational thing. I know kids today don't have attention spans. And by the way, that's because they've grown up in a different era. It's, people criticize, but I would say it's just different. I mean, older people don't think in those ways. So it's a different skill set. And I think that the problem with the modern skill set is nobody is enjoying those kinds of exchanges. People, this movie's boring. They're just talking. I need the action. And, video games, which are such a big part of it. I mean, people love The Last of Us because it's character-based. The gameplay's good, but it's the characters. Hell, I love Grand Theft Auto. Grand Theft Auto 5, when it first came out, I loved the character mode. You was going between the 3 characters. It was great. I loved it. I mean, I love Grand Theft Auto. Say what that says about me, I don't know. Ghost of Tsushima, Red Dead Redemption 2. All the things that we really love, the things that we remember that stick with us. The Last of Us was as a compelling narrative as it was a game. Kojima-san's games, like Death Stranding 2 looks like it's going to be dope. And what are they selling that game on? Obviously it's Kojima, but it's just, you've got those great characters. You've got great actors that you can recognize in their forms. And I don't want it to go away. I don't want, Like, it doesn't make economic sense for a studio today would not make Runaway Jury. I think it was Arnon Milchan. It was Regency, right? I think it was Regency. I should check before I did this, but they just it doesn't make economic sense. You know, I was talking to my friend Clark Von Trotha tonight. We were talking about movies. We were talking about a particular movie project we want to try and get off the ground, and we were talking about the economic reality of what's happened with studios. So here's the thing. Now that studios have been bought up by larger entertainment concerns that are publicly held companies, it's very simple. So if you make a movie, a big tentpole movie that costs $150 million and you have to market it and do all of that, it's a good bet that movies that cost that much are going to make a certain amount. So let's say you make a movie, just a quick economic lesson. The Brutalist. I know this because I looked it up today. The Brutalist, everybody makes a big deal about the fact that it only costs $10 million to make. Brady Corbet, fantastic. That movie, $10 million. I mean, everybody should look at that movie and be like, I want to make a 3.5-hour epic film for $10 million. That was a great example. It has made worldwide $45 billion. Now, The Brutalist is an example of a movie about people. Exactly what I'm saying. But let's say The Brutalist, I mean, it came out from A24, but let's say it's a studio movie. Let's just take that. So The Brutalist, as of today, according to Box Office Mojo, it's made $45 million and change. Here's why a studio would never make The Brutalist. Okay? So if you think about it, the current paradigm is basically a movie has to make 3 times what it cost, 3 to 4 times depending, to break even. But for the sake of argument, make it easier on my math skills. Let's say that it's 4 times what it costs. So The Brutalist cost it has to to break even. It has to make, actually, it's a bad example. I'm just going to go, anyway, never. Let's just go with me on this one. So The Brutalist has to make 4 times what it costs to break even, which is $40 million. And we know it's made $45 million worldwide. So here's the thing. Now, the studios, the reason we say that it has to make 4 times that, because it cost, so the Brutalist cost $10 million to make. A24 put it out. I don't know if A24 financed it, but let's say they did. So they put up $10 million to pay for the movie. Then they're going to market the movie. And let's just say the marketing costs are another $10 million. So it costs, A24 is out $20 million. Well, the movie, the reason that you say it has to make 4 times what it cost and cover the marketing is because the studio, A24, only gets back half of what the movie grossed, just for the sake of argument. Let's just call it half. So if a movie made $45 million, when it gets up to $40 million, remember, A24 is only going to get back half of that. Half of it goes to the studio or the movie theaters. So it grosses $45 million. $40 million covered. The theaters take their half. A24 basically gets back, okay, the movie's paid for, the production costs are paid for, and the marketing is paid for. A studio would say, well, what about the studio overhead? You got to pay for the studio overhead. We're not going to get into those economics yet. I'm just trying to make this easier. So there's $5 million left. So after the movie's paid for, there's $5 million left. And of that, remember, half of it goes to the movie theaters. So there's only $2.5 million profit. So the movie makes $45 million as of right now. The Brutalist has returned, after all the expenses are taken care of, the Brutalist has made A24 $2.5 million. Now, if you only are considering, they got back their marketing costs. That was part of it. But the actual production budget, so let's just take that $2.5 million. That's all they got profit. But if you think about it in terms of what they spent on the movie, which was $10 million, they got back $2.5 million. That was their profit, $2.5 million. That's 25% on their money. And for those of you who are savvy with investment and money, I am not one of those people, but that means that they made, for their $10 million investment, they got back 25%. And by the way, I am woefully oversimplifying all this, but just so you guys know out there, so $2.5 million, 25%, That, for A24, that's a pretty good result right now for a movie like on the Brutalist. $2.5 million on their $10 million. Anybody would say, great, you made $25 million bucks. I don't know how long they had to borrow or what the interest rates are, because remember, studios they're borrowing money, so there's a lot more fees involved. But that's not good for a publicly held company. If you're Warner Brothers, you can't make, if you spend $100 million and you made 25%, that means you would only get back, you spend $100 million and you get back $25 million in profit. That's not great. And they want more than that. So hopefully, like if you spend, let's do the same numbers. If you spend $100 million on a movie and it has made $400 million, there's your break-even point. And then if we go use the Brutalist numbers, it makes $450 million. So if you think about it, after you spend $100 million and a movie grosses $450 million, if you take the same numbers, at 400 you're at break even for marketing, for everything else. So what you have left is $50 million. You cut that in half. So the studio brings back $25 million. Well, think about it. I mean, $25 million. A24 made $2.5 million on the Brutalist, and Warner Brothers, for their $100 million investment, they made on the $400 million, on the $100 million movie, they only made $25 million. That's not enough. So what they're trying to do is, the reason the studios are they have to make far more profit. They've got to make $100 million profit, which means their movie has to make $800 million or $1 billion. That's what the studios are going for. So if you think about, it's not how much money the movie made, it's how much profit comes back to the studio. And a lot of people don't understand that. So one of the things that is problematic at a studio, and they're Warner Brothers and Pam Abdi and Mike DeLuca are finding themselves with this problem. So they make The Joker for $65 million. Doesn't include marketing, but it makes over $1 billion. The Joker on a $65 million spend. Hugely profitable. So what then happens, and this is what happens in Hollywood, the thinking is, okay, well, we made it for 65, it made $1 billion. So then obviously another one is going to make $1 billion. I mean, you can't not think it's not going to, because you already have precedent, and that's all you have to go by. The first one. So we'll up the budget to $200 million. I mean, you got Lady Gaga, musical numbers, all this, but you're going to spend $200 million. So the Joker only needed to make, if you double that if it's, made for $65 million, so you're up to, what is that, 130 million. So you're at $260 million at break even. So Joker 1 was $260 million break even. Then you get up to $1 billion, and that'll be creative accounting or whatever. But you're looking at hundreds of millions of dollars in profit from Joker 1. Hundreds of millions of dollars. Okay? At a $65 million spend. Joker Folie 2, at $200 million, break even's $800 million. It's $800 million. So you've gone from break even at being $260 to $800 million. Does that make any sense? In what universe, even if it was the greatest movie in the world and it also made $1 billion, why would you want to make your first movie for $65 million and your second movie for $200 million? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. Now, if you made Joker 2 for $100 million, that makes sense to me. Hopefully less. But, everyone gets their piece, because you got to get, as Jimmy Fallon said, what you can, when you can, how you can, or whatever. That wasn't Almost Famous. See, again, I'm remembering Jimmy Fallon and Almost Famous. If you think Mick Jagger's going to be dancing at 50, you're sorely mistaken. I mean, come on. You remember this stuff. But this is why the movie business, and to bring it back to Runaway Jury, no studio would make a movie like Runaway Jury. Runaway Jury, I think, well, actually, you know what? Let's find out, shall we? I should have done this beforehand, so I apologize. I didn't. But Box Office Mojo. Let's see. Maybe it has Runaway Jury. Let's see if it does. Runaway Jury. Here it is. Crime thriller, 2003. What does it say? Okay, Runaway Jury made $80 million. Now, I don't know okay, wow. The budget for Runaway Jury, according to Box Office Mojo, was $60 million. And worldwide, it grossed 80. John Grisham thriller, Dustin Hoffman, Gene Hackman. A movie like this, I mean, the argument could be made that this movie did not make money. If you go by our paradigm, there's no way this movie was not profitable. It just wasn't. Now, if a studio, do you think that, and this, by the way, was 22 years ago. Wow. Do you think that a studio, what would be the incentive? Would a motion picture studio make this today? No way. They wouldn't make any. They're not going to ever adapt a John Grisham book ever again. The Firm. This is interesting. I want to know, since it's another John Grisham book, just go with me on this one. Let's see. Tom Cruise, another Gene Hackman legal thriller. The Firm, which, by the way, is another movie I adore. I love The Firm. It's so good. John Grisham book. Okay, here you go. It does not have a reported, the budget is not here, but this movie, The Firm, made $270 million worldwide. I can't tell you what the budget was because it's not reported here. But that's respectable. I mean, if let's say this movie was 93, so this was a decade before Runaway Jury. I would imagine, even though it's a Tom Cruise movie, it's a Paramount movie. Paramount made Hunt for Red October in 90 for $30 million. I mean, even let's call this movie, and I don't know if this is true. Let's call it $35 million. It costs $35 million to make this movie. It definitely, so 35 million, 70 million, take it. It's 140 million would put it at break even, and it made 270 million worldwide. So that's pretty good. You know, you take it home and the studio is going to make a lot more than 25% on its money. And that's what you want. But the problem is no one would even make this movie anymore, even with Tom Cruise starring in the title role. No one's going to make a legal thriller, even if Tom Cruise and Gene Hackman were starring in it, if Gene Hackman was able to do so. Rest in peace, Gene. It just wouldn't happen. And so all the things that I love about movies, it's all changed. It's a different world now. And with AI coming in and people, it's going to be user-generated movies. I don't know if they're going to have any heart or anybody wants to watch them. But, I mean, a lot of people are going to be so enamored of the technology that they're going to be making movies on a daily basis. The problem is the magic of movie making will quickly go away. I don't know if we're going to realize the difference. Maybe it's going to take watching years of user-generated movies, prompted movies, to realize that they don't have any heart. Or maybe the opposite will be true. Maybe AI, through quantum computing, will figure out how to emulate the complexities of human emotion. It might. And then everybody will be out of a job. Maybe we'll still need great writing, but AI will do that too. Who knows? But for the most part, right now we still have Joe Gideon and all that jazz. I still have Jerry Maguire and Jerry Maguire. I still have Joseph Makowitz's All About Eve, one of my favorite movies ever. I've still got Sweet Smell of Success, Cats in the Bag and the Bags in the River. You're a cookie full of arsenic. Come on, man. If you haven't seen Sweet Smell of Success, where have you been? It's all about people, the dialogue in that movie. Man, if you want to learn how to be a real, true dick, man, watch The Sweet Smell of Success. Will teach you something about acidic barbs. Woo! Yeah. Anyway, that's what I was thinking about. I was thinking about the differences between the movie form, that 2-hour, 3-act structure, that Save the Cat, Blake Snyder structure, or a streaming show, which I enjoy streaming shows. Loved Paradise, but as I was calling it, definitely an airport read, just like Reacher. One of my favorite writers, Jonathan Mayberry, the new Joe Ledger book, Rogue Team International Book 4, Burn to Shine, came out. Woohoo! Just started today. Got it in the mail. I'm about 100 pages in. I've done a lot. I watched Runaway Jury and read 100 pages of a Jonathan Mayberry novel and edited True Noir. And I'm going to a sound mix tomorrow and was on the Campy show. So it was a full day. And I'm talking to you right now. What do you guys think? What do you think about the motion picture form? What are some films you watch simply because you want to hang out with those people? It's like when Penny Lane talks about you went to the record store to visit your friends in Almost Famous. The Corleone family feels like they're my relatives. Like, I never get tired of watching The Godfather. Never. Never, never, never. Just why? Because it's all people interacting. It's so good. And all my favorite movies, some of them are war movies, some of them. Amelie. I love Amelie. Amelie has one of the great narrating in a movie. Love the characters. Anyway, another movie that starts with the letter A, all about Eve, Amelie. I mean, it's never ending. I have a letter. It's a long letter, but I've been wanting to read this letter, but I'm going to read it. I'm going to read it because it kind of peripherally ties into what it is I'm talking about here. So this letter, it's kind of a long one. It's actually, it's a lot longer than I thought. Maybe I shouldn't read it, but I'm going to read it anyway. Why not? It comes to me, actually, first of all, I didn't even think about anybody sending in super chats. I wasn't even looking about that. Let me see if people did. The One Ginger Draven says, you talked about Hyperion on Versus this week, and I was wondering, who would you cast? Oh my God, I'm so bad at this. Who would you cast for the Pilgrims? Okay. You know what? That is, okay. Dan Simmons' Hyperion Cantos. But mostly Hyperion and Fall of Hyperion. It would be, I hate those kinds of questions because I don't think that way. Sometimes I'll think about who I want in a lead role, but I'd really have to sit down. I haven't read the Hyperion books in a long time. The last time I read was Rise of Endymion. When did that book come out? So I couldn't, I read Hyperion 30 years ago, maybe. When did they come out? I have the hardcovers. They're right there, actually. You can see that shelf, right? See where Dawn of the Dead is right there, the Dawn of the Dead board game. That's a tough one to find. That's still sealed. That's my Dan Simmons shelf. And actually, there's two Dan Simmons shelves. Both of these shelves are Dan Simmons shelves. But you can't see the books. I don't know who I would cast as the Pilgrims. I would have to go back and I need to reread them because I talk about them so much, but I've read them so long ago. I don't know, but that's a great question. Paul Allan Brunato. Paul Allan Brunato. Who him and his lovely wife, we had dinner. I met them face to face. I always love meeting people that I've known through the channel. Paul says, hi, Rob. Movies that have endured for me are from the 1970s from all genres, especially the underrated ones. It's my favorite decade of film. Well, I think part of that is because movies from the 70s are all about character. There aren't very many. I mean, even Jaws, which was a huge blockbuster. That movie's character. When Quint is introduced. I mean, come on. I'll catch this bird for you, but it's not going to be easy. Bad fish. I mean, that movie is so Jaws is so delicious. The plot's great, but it's so delicious because of the characters, because of Sheriff Brody. They're karate chopping the fences. I mean, the 50th anniversary of Jaws this year. You yell shark or you yell barracuda. People say, huh? What? You yell shark and you have a panic on your hands on the 4th of July. I mean, you can remember the things you remember about Jaws are the lines of dialogue, the stuff that happens. What's your name? Chrissy. Where are we going swimming? I mean, you can remember the whole movie. And swim, Charlie. And you just remember everything. And it's all, and the 70s, that's what the 70s were. I mean, even in a movie like Zardoz, you remember, the gun is good, the penis is evil. I mean, it's just, the 70s were all about people in movies. And I think all the great movies are really just about people. So, good call on that one. Darth Plato says, how about diplomacy, Rob? Just two guys talking for almost the entire movie. It ain't boring. Well, that's it. If the script is good. Diplomacy, that's a movie I should revisit. I'll tell you another movie, a recent movie that I love. The Big Short. I love The Big Short. But Margin Call. If you're looking for, if you've never seen Margin Call, if you've never seen the movie, just look up like Jeremy Irons' Margin Call and just watch the scene where Jeremy Irons comes into the boardroom late night and needs to have Zachary Quinto and Demi Moore is there, and they have to explain to Jeremy Irons. It's all about the subprime mortgage crisis. Watch just that scene. It's people sitting around a table. Zachary Quinto stands up. Kevin Spacey's there. That's what I'm talking about. Margin Call fucking rules. And if you want to have a nice afternoon, I don't know. Again, I don't know anything about finance, but I find The Big Short and The Social Network, the two. Social Network is another one. Wildly rewatchable. The Social Network is one of the most wildly rewatchable films ever. But if you want to watch The Big Short and Social Network, those are two movies where it's just people talking. I can't get enough. I can't stand them. If you're a Singing in the Rain fan. But yeah, I do love those kinds of movies. But now I can read this letter. Hang on, let me make sure. I just don't want to miss anybody if you guys have fired anything else in here. Romy Forever has become a member of the channel. Romy, thank you. I believe we will be having a member call this weekend. And there's a Midnight Metal. I'm tomorrow night, actually Saturday night, Sean Decker and Sarah Nicklin are going to come on, and we're going to give you a special preview of the movie Popeye the Slayer Man. Dave Parker's like overseas on a James Bond location, like Sardinia or Malta, working on the new Adam Green movie, doing editorial. So he can't be on, but Sean Decker is he's a great guy and an able assist. So tune in to Midnight Metal, and we're going to talk about Popeye the Slayer Man and the state of low-budget indie horror. So now I'm going to go to this is a really long letter, and it's all about Star Trek. It comes to us from Eric Skelton. So here we go. Dear Robert, High Constable of Fandom, I hope this email finds you pissed, drunk, and ready to brawl. Well, just ice water. That's right, boyo. I promised the Magna fucking Carta of emails defending Star Trek, Strange New Worlds, and well, here it is. Here I come. Full phaser banks blazing. I fully expect you to receive this manifesto with the same sense of rage and indignation that King John felt when his own barons hit him with their Magna Carta in 1215. But unlike that deluded little prick, Robin Hood's words, not mine, you still have time to change your tune. Consider this email an intervention, a come-to-God meeting, a visit from the ghost of Christmas nerds. I'm the lesser-known fourth of Charles Dickens' troupe of Christmas ghosts. They call me in when the first three fail at convincing someone to realize the error of their wicked ways. So, boo, buddy boy. First, you should know I'm not some recent Gen Z visitor to the Star Trek universe. Star Trek fundamentalists like to claim that any of us who enjoy New Trek are obviously recent and unworthy immigrants to the franchise, unlike you longtime native, traditional, and legitimate Puritan stalwarts. Well, fuck that crap, Commodore Schmidlap. I came to Star Trek as a millennial little Scranton, Pennsylvania boy in the early 90s, when PBS aired 3 episodes of the original series every Saturday night, followed by Uncle Ted's Monster Feature. I love those episodes. Not Spectre the Gun or Spock's Brain so much. I watched TOS religiously while building cardboard starships for my huge collection of Playmates Trek action figures. It was the height of the Next Generation's popularity, so between the 2 series and Deep Space Nine later on, I was hooked. Until Voyager was hurled into sections of the galaxy I didn't give a fuck about, or on the UPN network that wasn't part of my cable package. And Enterprise focused on the Xindi War instead of the more interesting and consequential Romulan War. Between that and the arrival of women in my young life, I drifted away from Trek for decades until 2022. Now to you, sir. I listen to your observations at night while delivering 140 miles of newspaper routes across the frozen breadth and width of northeastern PA between Wilkes-Barre and Scranton. I crave distraction as I speed from town to town and hamlet to village, like the drunken Irish mailman in 1988's Funny Farm. Most often, your show's a great asset during these long nights, but fuck a duck, Rob, when you start on Strange New Worlds pummeling the innocent little series like some abusive coal miner husband, all progress on my end stops dead. I'm forced to pause my deliveries and fire off an array of photon super chat after super chat in its defense under the name DUI Champ. I've listened to just about all of your criticism of the show. To start off on a point of mutual agreement regarding New Trek in general, Discovery's bizarre writing is largely indefensible. Its plots are overly convoluted, and the finales of seasons 2 and 3 and 4 make no definable sense whatsoever. Picard Season 3 is fantastic, but Seasons 1 and 2 are a rotten bowl of what the fuck was that? I hold the J.J. Abrams films in the same low esteem that I hold Trek cartoons. Fun, but easily forgettable, nothing to be taken seriously, one way or another. It's Strange New Worlds that gives me the fix I need. Our first point of departure is our philosophy of Star Trek. Over the decades, you'll have to indulge me here, Rob, I'm going to dig into your brain a bit, but you seem to have built a wide web of beliefs and preferences based on the many novels, comics, games, behind-the-scenes trivia, production memoranda, and technical manuals that are most likely placed on the bookshelves in your Robservatory or stored away in boxes somewhere. To protect the canonical sanctity within those materials, you've often questioned, more a demand than an actual question, why Star Trek took to looking backwards instead of moving forwards. I am quite sure you can summon the same speech you've given to your viewers, to Campia viewers, to Chris Gore's viewers, etc., just as easily as I can recite the opening to FDR's Pearl Harbor address to Congress on December 9th, 1941. To me, the obvious answer is the story potential during the Pike era is too good to pass up. The only noteworthy addition to Trek that Discovery ever produced was the casting of the I can't even say that. Estimable Anson Mount. And I continue to be overjoyed. His ornament is sitting above my head, just as his figure is watching you from your shelf. Well, my first point to you would be the entire show is palatable to you and everyone else because Anson Mount is palatable. He's the one thing they've literally built an entire show around, and as long as he's in it, people will watch it no matter how much gobbledygook they surround him with. It was great casting, but he's so head and shoulders far above the rest of the show as to be, it doesn't matter what the rest of the show is. As long as you're watching him talk and walk around in costume, maybe cook a few meals in his cabin, it doesn't matter. That's one of the reasons I can't stand Strange New Worlds. It's not truly an ensemble show. It's an Anson Mount show with all of the 7 dwarves beneath him. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. With the establishment of his character, the 11 years, was it 11 years between April and Kirk, under his command offer a fantastic opportunity to revisit the TOS era, but with modern production values. Nope. The problem with the modern Star Trek is it's not visiting the TOS era. You're visiting a TOS era through our sensibilities now, which means it's not really the TOS era, which is my first problem with the entire show. And you can't sit there and go, the times have changed. You are making a show that is asking us to believe that it's part of Star Trek's history. If I was going to make a show about World War II, I wouldn't make the officers in World War II talk like they were talking from today. You would have to have fealty to what World War II is like, unless you didn't care about history. Strange New Worlds has asked me to accept it as Star Trek history, which it clearly is not. It is gobbledygook that has no connection except in name only, and because they've called it Star Trek, there's not one shred, not one iota of effort made to try and link it to Star Trek's past. Not at all. And that's why I think it fails, but that's just me. Anyway. Many longtime Trek fans have wondered what a mix of the TOS aesthetic would look like today. Of course, the obvious problem is the daunting canon, and the fact that no one can write the way they wrote back then. We don't have writers that are as educated, or that had the same kind of life experience, or that lived through that era of America. We have a bunch of, kids that grew up watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer that are about 20 years behind where they should be in terms of maturity level, and I include myself in that. We'll disagree on this point, and I've had the argument with the Trekyards boys, as well as a few Facebook exchanges with Doug Drexler, but you cannot use that 1966 Enterprise set in a modern television show. Yes, you could. You absolutely could. You just have to light it differently. And by the way, we saw what it would look like in Enterprise, in Through a Mirror Darkly. You could use that. All you have to do is you can add detail to it. I would agree with you. But, you still have to take into consideration how big your ship is. The sets in Strange New Worlds and in all of modern Star Trek are ridiculously huge. Don't believe them. I don't believe them. So I can't stand that argument because absolutely you could. It's not about, and by the way, I've shot on the Ticonderoga sets with an aspect ratio of 239:1. You absolutely, it would just light it differently. Just saying. We'll disagree on this point, and I've had this argument with the Trekyards boys as well as a few Facebook exchanges with Doug Drexler, but you cannot use that 1966 Enterprise set in a modern television show. Wrong. The set is a legendary gem, but it belongs exclusively to that show and those actors. No, it doesn't. Not canonically. We didn't ask them to set a show on the Enterprise. They're literally setting a show on that same Enterprise. And you could say, oh, it's going to be refitted again. By the way, we already have for the 30th anniversary of Star Trek in 1996, we watched Deep Space Nine, totally different aesthetic, different look, different way of shooting the show. They went back to the Enterprise 30, from the 60s, and it worked just fine. It worked just fine because it works. People will believe it. That's what good filmmakers would do. But nope. All these arguments, I totally don't agree with you at all. And it's not because I'm saying you're making a Star Trek historical show. Make a Star Trek historical show. When you watched Star Wars, they're not changing the Millennium fucking Falcon unless you want to be like J.J. Abrams saying, well, if you buy it with a rectangular dish, we get a cut of the marketing. So, Strange New Worlds does a fantastic job of blending and updating the TOS aesthetic for modern viewers. Of course, it challenges canon, but compared to the wealth of story potential, compared to the joy of watching new stories I can fall in love with, and the delight of exploring the origin and depth of Spock's loyalty to Pike that explains his willingness to sacrifice both his and Kirk's careers in the menagerie, the sacrifice was well worth it. Yeah, except they treat Spock like he's a high school student with a learning disability. Spock didn't become Spock on the Enterprise. He became Spock when he went from Vulcan to work with humans and go to Starfleet Academy. We're not watching Spock, coming of age. It's not James. Remember James at 15 and James at 16? Remember those shows? Probably not. Barely anybody does. But it was a show. That's what they treat Spock like. They act like the fact that, I'll give you another example. Spock is the worst written character on that show. Whoever writes Spock, they put a little bit of their own insecurity and their own learning disabilities and their own whatever they impose on him. Spock is better than everybody because he has to be both the perfect Vulcan and the perfect human. But you can't be either one of those things, but we watch him try. But he does a damn good job. Star Trek Strange New Worlds told us, and we're supposed to believe, canonically, that Mbenga gave Spock his Vulcan harp, his lute or whatever. And here, Spock, you have anxiety because you turned human. Why don't you learn to play this and quell your anxiety? Are you kidding me? Spock can sight read music from another planet when he sits down in Requiem for Methuselah and plays the harpsichord because he can read Brahms. This is a Brahms waltz no one's ever seen. He sits down, he's sight reading music. No one told him he had to pick up. He learned music from the time he was a little kid. Why? Because Vulcan is kind of a musical language as well. I'm just saying. Anyway. You got me all riled up, and I'm only on what? Page 2? Of course it challenges canon, but compared to the wealth of story potential, compared to the joy of watching new stories I can fall in love with, how can you fall in love with the new stories? There hasn't been one that's been very well written. There's that one Klingon episode where, they commit murder. That was okay, but it was ridiculous, and they committed murder. So, anyway, Spock's loyalty... I read that. On repeated occasions, you've criticized the show for not following the Pike-era comic book series. I'm not criticizing it for not following a comic book show, or a series. I'm criticizing it because the comic books had better stories in it. As evidenced, what was... When Otoy did their unification shorts, where did they get all that stuff from? From the comics, from the New Voyages comics published by Marvel. You've asked what happened to certain characters from the Cage, like Dr. Boyce and Yeoman Colt. My answer to you is, are they really essential? Yes, because they're from the same era. I mean, first of all, to be fair, the best scene probably in The Cage is when Boyce comes in and talks to Pike. That's an incredible scene, you would think, but Boyce is literally an old white man. He was the first person on the chopping block, but it was ridiculous to get rid of him because having that elder statesman with that kind of wisdom, he was Pike's Obi-Wan fucking Kenobi. What did they do? They got rid of him. Why? Because they have no integrity. Just saying. My answer to you is, are they really essential? Hey, I didn't ask them to go back and use the Cage for everything they do. I didn't ask them that. But I didn't ask them to make a Khan Noonien Singh ancestor. Ridiculous. I didn't. That was Akiva Goldsman all the way. I didn't ask them to poach Uhura, Mbenga, Nurse Chapel from the original series. I mean, it's a show that cannot exist on its own. They could have had it exist or steal Una's backstory from Dorothy Fontana's book, Vulcan's Glory. The show's creatively bankrupt. None of it was conceived originally by the people that made that show. It all came from somebody else's work, like they do on modern Star Trek. Let's just take this, let's just take that. Let's steal from Ursula K. Le Guin's Those Who Walk Away from Umlaus. Let's just steal. I don't have an original bone in my body. I'm Akiva Goldsman. I won an Academy Award for adapting someone else's work. And that's all I can do. And now what am I going to do? I'm going to make a time tunnel, Land of the Giants, and Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea multiverse. Oh boy, because you did so well with Lost in Space. Anyway, Boyce is retired and Colt is now serving on the USS Somewhere Else. I fail to see how their departure diminishes the show. Hey, I didn't ask them. It diminishes the show because the first person I would like to have seen is Dr. Boyce and his relationship with Pike. Dr. Boyce was a father figure. That's something that we only saw in The Cage. We've never seen that before. What would it be like when you have somebody that's significantly older than you, that's part of your ship, and he can come in and pour you a drink and knows you better than you know yourself? You know what that is? That's what adults do. But that's not what they do on Strange New Worlds. Both you and Red Letter Media have complained about the lighthearted tone of the show, but this seems odd considering TOS had plenty of episodes goofier than most Strange New Worlds episodes. The Harry Mudd episodes, a piece of the action where Kirk adopts a weird Chicago accent in the episode's second half for reasons that escape me. He's getting into character. The Trouble with Tribbles, Catspaw, or DS9's Little Green Men and Prophet and Lace were comical, some to the point of irritation. Why is there a double standard? Okay, first of all, okay. They fuck you at the drive-thru. They know you're going to be miles away before they... Anyway, here's the difference. There's good comedy and there's bad comedy. We've all seen the clip coming up, the upcoming scene from Strange New World Season 3, where they get all turned into Vulcans, right? So what they try and do is, okay, they've been transmuted into Vulcans. Here's the problem with Strange New Worlds and why the writing on that show is insufferably bad. Let's say that you're whoever's watching this right now, but you were going to go on an undercover mission and they were able to somehow turn you into, say, you're Chinese. They transmuted you to look like a Chinese person because you're going to go into Beijing and steal some secrets, but you needed to look Chinese. Does that mean you're suddenly going to think in Chinese? You're still going to be you. You just look Chinese. Well, in Strange New Worlds, suddenly the entire crew is acting as if they're Vulcans. They've been, the people that are transmuted or transformed into Vulcans, they don't just look like Vulcans, they are Vulcans. Now, first of all, it isn't, and here's where you draw the line. Suddenly, your brain processes, your personality has been also turned into Vulcan, and now you're making fun of Spock for being a half Vulcan. That blows away any kind of credibility that you have. Now, that is you can make that funny if it's not actually Star Trek. With Star Trek, you have to have some kind of semblance of believability to your comedy. The trouble with Tribbles is still serious. It's just presented comedically. There really is a Klingon plot. There really is what they stave off an ecological disaster. But it's the situation that becomes funny. So the characters, it's a humorous situation, but it's never at the expense of the characters themselves. In a piece of the action, the situation is absurd. The situation's absurd, but there's real peril. And it's really fun when you're watching the crew of the Enterprise suddenly in a Chicago mobs of the 20s show. So it's a fish out of water story, but not at the expense of our characters. They're trying to fit in, and what they're doing is their intelligence is helping them fit in, and it becomes amusing because of the situation. It doesn't become slapstick, and it doesn't become farcical. And that's the difference. The Harry Mudd episodes, the thing that Harry Mudd is he's a character that the Enterprise crew would never normally come across. So when he comes on board the Enterprise, he's so out of the realm of what they're dealing with, which is also a fish out of water story, but from the reverse angle. You're dealing with the fish out of water as Harry Mudd. And then, of course, in I, Mudd, in the second season, when you go down to the android planet, that's also absurd, but you're not doing the absurdity at the expense of the characters. That clip, you can watch it. Go watch that clip from Strange New World Season 3 when they become Vulcans. It's really dumb. And the comedy is happening at the expense of Spock, and it doesn't make any sense. I don't believe that scenario. It is a scenario that isn't smart. It's a dumb scenario. It's a junior high scenario, or I've smoked too much weed on a Friday night in my college dorm room. What if they turned into Vulcans, man? Yeah, dude, that'd be totally hilarious. I'll have some more dank nugs. Wait. I don't know. Not good. DS9's Little Green Men and Prophet and Lace were comical to the point of irritation. Why is there a double standard? Because there's good comedy and bad comedy. That's it. It's not a double standard. You've commented on how relaxed military etiquette and discipline appears to be in Pike's command. I don't understand that criticism at all. Historically, some of our military commanders were hard asses like George Patton, while others were more relaxed like the Soldier General Omar Bradley. Different commanders, different styles. Yeah, but were you watching Patton and Omar Bradley, when you're watching the movie Patton doesn't invite all of his subordinates into his cabin and cook them dinner. Not only that, if there's no military decorum on the ship, how are you supposed to believe in the reality? It's all part of the tapestry of the reality of the show. My son is in the U.S. Air Force, and he's told me how he encountered different commanders with different intensities and styles. Yeah, you mean like Captain Jellicoe or Captain Picard? That's believable. I don't think that Pike would be... Look, Kirk interacted with lots of his crew, but he doesn't always have them over to his cabin for dinner. You're dealing with Captain Pike because you want to have Uhura and Nurse Chapel. Like, why is Nurse Chapel... Why are all these people interacting all the time? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I don't believe it. There's no verisimilitude. You've said Pike gets bossed around by his crew, told what to do. When? Pike has never been disrespected by his crew. I totally disagree with that. Number one gives him pushback or sass from time to time, always in private, but it's no different than Guinan or Picard's relationship or Leo McGarry and President Bartlett's friendship. See, you're giving me these examples of things, and I disagree with you. I totally disagree with you that Picard and Guinan's friendship, the thing about that is Picard and Guinan's friendship goes back way, and Leo McGarry and Bartlett have been friends. They've been friends for years and years and years and years and years. And they have a very credible friendship, an adult friendship, because it was written by Aaron Sorkin, that you believe in. And if you want to look at original Star Trek as an example, that show establishes the relationship between McCoy and Spock and Kirk in a much more adult, much more respectful way. And it doesn't lean back on military decorum. They're friends, but there is still there is still a military chain of command on the ship. They don't know, none of the people writing modern Star Trek have made any credible attempt to make anybody believe there's a chain of command on the Discovery, on the Enterprise, on any modern Star Trek vessel. Because none of the people writing it seem to have any kind of inkling of what the military is supposed to be. And then they'll tell you, oh, Star Trek's not about the military. Then why are there ranks? But anyway, in describing life on Edwards Air Force Base, my son has said, the place is more like a college dorm and everyone is fucking everyone else. Okay, that's true, but that's not what Star Trek is. I believe a writer from Discovery made the same point to you a few weeks ago on the Inglorious Treksperts podcast. Yeah, and I disagreed with him too. Don't put a writer for Discovery to me and say I'm supposed to look up to him. I have a general rule for Star Trek: The Original Series is the crown jewel of the franchise, and all Star Trek must either flow to or from TOS like antimatter through dilithium crystals. Enterprise and Discovery both committed the same crime. They veered off from the main thrust of the macro-canonical history flowing to TOS. Enterprise was on the precipice of the Romulan War, but the writers, I'm sure, under pressure from stupid executives, made an ugly right turn into the Xindi War. Well, no, that was more of a ratings decision, but they were building up to the Romulan War, and if they ever made Eric Jedrenson's script that was supposed to get made after Enterprise went off the air called Star Trek The Beginning, it was all about the Romulan War. It was going to be a trilogy of movies. And I really enjoyed that first script, and why they made Starfleet Academy when they had Jedrenson's script, I don't know, but they should have done that. Enterprise could have added layers to the universe in the way Strange New Worlds services TOS, but they deviated and ended the series with a boring holodeck thud. Everyone knows that. Discovery ignored so much of TOS that it's nearly impossible to believe it's in the same franchise. You're right. Alex Kurtzman was and still is correct in believing Trek needs new fans, fresh blood, but in 2017 he strangely believed including gold command shirts to the crew or proper Klingons or trying to reassemble TOS aesthetic in any way would send potential fans fleeing for their lives. Do you know why people are fans of things? There's only one reason why people are fans of things. Because the things they're fans of are good. That's it. The reason that Star Trek Discovery didn't catch on is because it's not good. It's not good science fiction. It's not good. It's not a good ensemble show. And it was a horrible Star Trek show. It failed on every count. Because the people writing it didn't know how to write science fiction. They didn't know how to write Star Trek. And they didn't know how to write a good ensemble. I mean, it's as simple as that. People are fans of things that are good. Now, there's also, you can be fans of things that are campy, but there's a reason why there's only one Rocky Horror Picture Show. You can't write something to be campy. Campiness or it has to be organic to whatever it is that you're making. It just does. That logic recently repeated in the defense of the criminally indefensible Section 31 escapes me. Enter Strange New Worlds, a welcome course correction. I'm happy that I can watch Strange New Worlds and TOS as if they're different seasons of the same show. I certainly can't. Strange New Worlds is clearly moving toward the original series. Yeah, by recasting Kirk. Again, a big mistake. They could have done a really interesting show, and look, even though Better Call Saul is a follow-up to Breaking Bad, it's its own thing. Yes, it is basically a prequel that eventually meets up with Breaking Bad, but it's what Strange New Worlds should have done. I mean, they had to go. I mean, in these shows, they have to go back and let's get the Guardian of Forever without any understanding. But we have to make the Guardian of Forever like it was in Harlan Ellison's original script. It just drives me crazy. Here's my problem. Here's my problem with all this. The problem is people are not the same kinds of consumers of storytelling the way they were when Star Trek came on. And I think a lot of it has to do with people that like those things, especially college students. People were far more educated than they were. I mean, Star Trek was huge in colleges. People in colleges back in the 60s had much stricter, you had far stricter upbringings in terms of what you had to learn in school than we do now. I think people are far less educated consumers of stories. Now, they're educated in different ways. Like, for instance, they can accept imagery much quicker. But it's a meme culture. They're not deep thinkers anymore. People aren't thinking three-dimensionally. Everything is very surface. I know that because I interact with a lot of people, and there's not a lot of nuance happening. And I think that's probably part of the reason that a lot of people, there's a schism between people that grew up with great storytelling and, I don't know, reading books than there is with people who just grew up watching a lot of TV. There's a difference. My response is Star Trek has often mined outside sources for content with zero attribution. TNG's Chain of Command Part 2 blatantly rips off George Orwell's 1984. I need not elaborate how. I disagree with that. That was Chain of Command Part 2 is more of an Amnesty International thing about how torture is not an effective use of extracting information. And it's, I mean, while and George Orwell's 1984 was touching on some of those same things, but it's not a ripoff of 1984. I know because I interviewed the writer for and you can watch the documentary on the Chain of Command Blu-ray that we did. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. How many lights are there versus how many fingers? Yeah, I would say that's an homage. It's not ripping it off. Just like Balance of Terror is a submarine show. But yeah, I mean, when you're paying homage to something, you're not ripping it off unless you rip off the entire storyline like Strange New Worlds did with Ursula K. Le Guin's story, Those Who Walk Away from Umlaus. The Super Borg ship in Picard Season 3 is basically the Death Star, and the Enterprise D flies out of the flames like, well, you know. Yes. And they would tell you that. They know that. That's exactly what they were doing. They were name-checking that. It's not necessarily the Death Star. Borg Cube is really big. But that's what they were intentionally doing, and we all know it. It's a wink and a nod, and it's there for us for that very reason. The same way that many comic book creators will copy other comic book creators' covers as an homage, or they'll sign it Perez after Byrne or something. And that has happened in genre circles for a long time. Terry Metalis gave no attribution to George Lucas. For fuck's sake, man. Okay, there's a difference. They weren't stealing the story of Return of the Jedi, but the idea of a giant ship. And by the way, Return of the Jedi and flying into the Death Star is not the only time that something like that has happened. You know, we've had other ships. I mean, go back to The Spy Who Loved Me, the James Bond movie, where the Leparis, the tanker that devours 3 nuclear submarines, they were ripping off from You Only Live Twice when you had Spectre stealing space capsules and bringing them down to their volcanic base. I mean, it's homage. It's not stealing. It's using the same plot points. There's a difference. TNG offers not one but 2 evil or malcontented twin brother plots that can be found in many 1980s and 90s series. Yes, because twin brother plots are tropes. That's different. It's not stealing. It's a trope. Geordie LaForge becomes the Manchurian Candidate in The Mind's Eye, and I can only imagine. Yes, but they were intentionally doing that. You know, it was a spy story, and that is also, the Manchurian Candidate has become a trope. That's a different thing. How many countless novels Star Trek has mined for story ideas? Of course, I know the writers. Look, when you're dealing with a show that has military aspects to it, there are military stories. For instance, you could say that Hell in the Pacific, the episode where Geordi, that's not the name of the episode, where the enemy, you know, where Geordi goes on to the planet and rescues the Romulan. You know, and they have to work together to survive. That is a time-honored story that goes back to antiquity, really. On more than one occasion, you've criticized the Strange New Worlds episode, The Broken Circle. In the episode, Mbenga gives Spock a harp to help relieve stress and PTSD stemming from his Gorn encounter in Strange New Worlds. All those who wander, you've claimed the exchange somehow implies Spock is not already a trained musician, but in the scene itself, Spock says all Vulcans study music for its mathematical properties. By immediately playing the harp, he's clearly a banger, a phrase you once used, of a musician. But he's not, and that's not what they say. The episode takes nothing away from his talents and accomplishments. Disagree. The whole series takes away from Spock's. Spock is the butt of jokes in every episode. I mean, they treat him like they saddled with him with a learning disability. What I find compelling and riveting about Ethan Peck's depiction of Spock is how different his younger Spock is from Leonard Nimoy's older and more seasoned portrayal. I know you've heard some of these defenses before, but not from me. On one podcast, replying to someone who said correctly, in my view, that Peck's Spock was still learning how to exist alongside a human crew, you argued Spock already knows how to live with humans because he was raised by his human mother. I totally disagree with you. In Star Trek IV, Amanda explains to Spock that he was raised in the Vulcan way. Spock was raised on Vulcan primarily alongside Vulcans in the most elite of Vulcan institutions and traditions. It's understandable how a patrician Vulcan could suffer from culture shock and growing pains when thrust into a crew of 230 humans. I love both portrayals of Spock. I love watching younger Spock being baffled by the complexities of his crewmates' myriads of personalities, as opposed to older Spock, who is usually either irritated or slightly amused by human behavior, an irritation that manifested itself most strongly around the ship's doctor. Okay. Here's the thing. Spock knows what he's doing. Spock, you can't tell me that Spock's human mother didn't rub off on him. Like, just because he grew up on Vulcan, he learned a lot. Spock, half the time on Star Trek in the original series, Spock is wantonly making fun of both McCoy and Spock. Spock is making fun of McCoy and Kirk. You see it in so many episodes. He's clowning with them. And that's the whole point of it, is that for all of his keeping his emotions suppressed and humor is a difficult concept, he knows exactly what he's doing. If you look at the end of an episode like Mirror Mirror, when they come back from the mirror universe, and Spock's like, they're talking about, they're giving him shit, where you should have seen yourself with a beard. And Spock's like, well, you forget, gentlemen. And then he says, I had the opportunity to closely examine your counterparts, the very flower of Homo sapiens. He gives as good as he gets. Spock, it's not a learning curve. That is a trope that they took to make it easier to write Spock. And it's lazy, and I hate it. But that's just me. 5 weeks ago, or a few weeks ago, you said the inclusion of Lon Noonien Singh was a stupid idea. It is. Though you enjoy the character. I do. I'm assuming the small universe must everything be connected sci-fi trope is what bothers you. Okay, no. It doesn't bother me. You're telling me that somehow Khan left a descendant of his on Earth. Like, the whole point is that Khan and 96 of his followers left Earth. So you're telling me that Khan Noonien Singh, one of the genetic supermen, who is genetically engineered, somehow not only did he have kids or progeny that he left on Earth, but after the eugenics wars were over in the late 1990s, that the Noonien Singh family was allowed to grow and flourish all the way into the 23rd century. Lon Noonien Singh has been around all that time. And with the fact that genetic engineering is banned, it's 300 years later. It's a dumb idea. It doesn't make sense. And I hate that. And it's a cheap shot. They could have made her, what they should have done, a brand new character that they owned, that they created from scratch. They could have made her anything, but no, we have to make her tied into Khan. Why does everything, modern Star Trek is so obsessed with Khan as a villain because everyone's obsessed with Star Trek too. It's infected Star Trek. It's infected Star Trek. It's so terrible. And and the funny thing is they keep bringing back counterparts or Khan-like creatures without understanding Space Seed. It's almost like everybody has seen Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, but nobody went and saw Space Seed, or nobody bothered to watch it. And I hate that. You're clearly not alone in this, but is it really so hard to believe that Khan, clearly a man of many appetites, sired multiple children before being caught, cuffed, freeze-dried, and jetted off to deep space? He wasn't caught or cuffed. They left. They chose to leave. They got the hell out of Dodge on their own accord. And yeah, Elon Musk has 12 or 13 children. How many descendants will he have running around over the next few centuries? Yes, but he wasn't a despot that was taking over a quarter of the world, and he wasn't at war. Elon Musk is one of the richest men in the world and can do whatever he wants. He's not at war, and he doesn't run a country. Oh, wait. But, yeah. Adolf Hitler had 2 nephews that lived 3 hours away from me in New York for decades. It's strange but true. Look it up. Okay, that's fine. I don't believe that there's going to be a descendant of Khan Noonien Singh running around talking about. And by the way, does that mean that the whole family, she's got genetic powers, and she's only mated with people that also have genetic, that are products of genetic engineering. Speaking of Khan, you've stated that Strange New World should have maintained 1996 as the year of the Eugenics Wars. Okay, I don't maintain that Strange New World should maintain 1996 as the year of the Eugenics Wars. That's Star Trek history. That's Star Trek history. It's immutable history. That's what they should leave it as. That happened. It didn't happen in our history, just like there's, what is before and after the Battle of Yavin in Star Wars time. To explain how 1996 has come and gone without the war, you offer your own headcanon explanation that Star Trek history is an alternative history to our own. It is. You're entitled to your headcanon. It's part of the fun of Star Trek, but I prefer to accept Strange New World's depiction of Romulan time tinkering in tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. It allows the franchise the flexibility to create new stories without running into the brick wall of canon. Okay. Here's the thing. I didn't ask these people to make a Star Trek show. They chose to do it. And one of the fun things, if you're going to make, they did this with Rings of Power. All these creators come in and you have a guy like Professor Tolkien who's created the entire history of Middle Earth. It's there. It doesn't exist. It's fictional, but there's the history. You don't, as a new writer, get to come in. I can say you don't. You can do whatever the fuck you want. But that history, it's a ready-made world that you have to then work in. If you're going to make a World War II story, like if someone's going to write a credible story about World War II, you don't suddenly have F-14 Tomcats, unless, of course, you're making the final countdown and an aircraft carrier goes through time. You're not doing that. If you're telling a World War II story, you got to tell a World War II story. There was certain technology that existed in World War II that you have to show. You can't just decide that there's going to be cell phones in World War II. Otherwise, your story loses credibility. Why doesn't Star Trek have its history preserved? Why? And if you're making a prequel to the original series, why don't you show some fealty to the original series? Why do you get to come along and change it? And not as good. Tomorrow, you're telling me that Khan Noonien Singh he's in some facility in Toronto? Really? And the whole thing about that is, I'll tell you something else that's wrong with that. The idea of controlled genetics was something that came out of the late 19th and 20th centuries. It refers back to some monstrous experiments, without saying it directly, that might have been being done by Nazi scientists, and later, maybe Project Paperclip or whatever. It added something to the tapestry of the show that we viewers, I wasn't alive when the show first started, but we as savvy viewers understood that eugenics had been talked about throughout the 20th century, and that the idea of the Ubermensch or whatever, what the Nazi regime wanted to do, loomed large in the creators' minds when they came up with that concept. So you kind of have to be true to that. And the idea that there were these eugenics wars made Star Trek's history interesting. So why change it? Why do they get to change it? And if they do change it, give me a good reason. Oh, there's Romulan tampering of the timeline. Oh, okay. That's lazy, stupid storytelling. The Star Trek history is Star Trek history. Khan Noonien Singh, they found him in Space Seed. So it's not just Star Trek history from 1996. You've now changed the entirety of the Star Trek timeline. Why would you do that? You have a timeline that you can work with and that's already there. Because these writers think that their ideas are better? Why work in Star Trek at all? Why not create your own thing? Why do you change it? Why do you make something that isn't what it was supposed to be? And you can't just tell me in one episode of Star Trek when they've already depicted all of this history, going from, think about it. We see Star Trek, we hear about what happened in 1996. We meet Khan in Space Seed when they find the Botany Bay drifting in space 300 years later. Then we see what happens after that. So there's hundreds of years of history accounted for, and these idiots who made Strange New Worlds just come in and go, no, we're going to change it all because, the Romulans were doing something with time travel. That to me is lazy and stupid. Having your Star Trek timeline could be much more interesting. Than it is to, we're just going to change things. Do you think in tomorrow, the depiction of Khan that they show us is better than what we've already seen in Space Seed and Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan? Come on. It's not. If it was better, maybe I would feel differently. But it wasn't better. So, can't go with you there. Let's see. Where am I? Hang on. I have to find. Okay. A few weeks ago. Okay, I got it. That's where I was. Speaking of con. Oh, I already did that. I could go through canon question, issue by issue, argument to justification from the Gorn. No one in Arena actually said the Starfleet had never encountered the Gorn before, which left room for canonical flexibility. Okay. They had not encountered the Gorn before. We know that from the episode. We can infer. We saw it. We already saw what happened. Kirk talks about they call the creature a Gorn. He says that in the episode. Here's the thing. What they did, and we also saw the Gorn again in Through a Mirror Darkly. So here's the thing. What they decided, this is another reason I hate this show. When they made Strange New Worlds, they thought to themselves, well, we need a big bad. Who's going to be our big bad? What can we do? We're going to make it the Gorn. We're going to make the Gorn cool. We're going to make them dangerous because now people look back at Arena and think it's crazy. It's funny. It's a man in a suit. He throws the rock. From our perspective now, the idea to come in and make the Gorn cool probably seemed like a good idea. But what it did was it diminished that episode. Arena is one of Star Trek's most recognizable classic episodes, and the message at the end of the episode is terrific. And what you did was you just turned the Gorn into something where you took a bunch of, they're now just xenomorphs. You've taken a bunch of tropes from things that aren't Star Trek and made them they're the new monsters. It doesn't make any sense. Their life cycle doesn't make any sense. The fact that they start out as these hungry creatures that turn into a spacefaring race doesn't make any sense. If you had somebody that could do world building, like, Peter Hamilton or something, then I might believe it. But it's clumsy and badly done. And that's why I hate it. Canonical to Khan's age, from Admiral April's race versus his appearance in the animated series to the nacelle struts on Pike's Enterprise, but it misses the point. As lifetime Star Trek fans, we both come to Strange New Worlds armed with our own philosophies and preferences. No. I think that all of the great science fiction and fantasy world building it's already out there to see. If you look at, take your pick, ask anybody, whether you're reading Julian May's Saga of Pliocene Exile, whether you're reading Terry Brooks's Sword of Shannara, or whether you're reading the Thomas Covenant, Tales of the Unbeliever, what is that, Stephen R. Donaldson's Thomas Covenant books, Tolkien's books, the Song of Ice and Fire, all the great science fiction and fantasist world builders have already set the table. We know how it's done. What the people who are doing Strange New Worlds decided to do was just throw all that aside willy-nilly whenever they wanted to and change things. Now, this is not the way I think it should be. It's the 20th century, the great literature, the great science fiction, fantasy, and horror literature, if you're a Necroscope fan or something, the great writers create these tapestries to make us believe in the world. They give us, one of the great things about, say, House of the Dragon is it takes place 100 years before Game of Thrones, but it feels like it's in the Game of Thrones universe. They didn't sit there and go, well, we have to make it different. We have to change things. We don't need these. Let's go to different places. No, we get to see Dragonstone the way it was almost 100 years ago, and we can go, wow, there's Dragonstone at its height. They've taken away the joy of that rather than use the universe and go back in and extrapolate on it. They're like, no, let's change everything. We don't like the Gorn. They look goofy because that's all they could do in 1966. Let's change them and turn them into xenomorphs. Well, aliens is cool. We'll make it. The whole process, the philosophical process behind it. How am I in the middle of a Star Trek rant at 12:30 at night when I have to be at a sound mix tomorrow morning? How have you done this to me? I was all happy to do a short observations, and now look what you've done. Look what you've done. No, okay. As a consumer of fantastical worlds for my whole life, all these other great writers have done it way better than the writers of modern Star Trek have. And it's frustrating to watch. And we see it now we've seen it with Star Wars. We've seen it with Doctor Who. We've seen it. There is a common thread with everybody that's working, all of these modern writers working in these legacy IPs. Everybody wants to come in and change things. And, when you talk about whether I like the comics or whether I like the novels, do you know what the thing about the novelists and the comic book writers do? They keep the Star Trek world the same. And they answer questions about it. They work within it and they extrapolate upon it. And that's why the best Star Trek novelists, whether it's David Mack, whether it's Diane Duane, whether it's Mr. Bennett, Peter David, all the great Star Trek writers love the universe, so they extrapolated upon it. They didn't come in and say, well, this thing you love, it wasn't really like that. We're going to change it. And that's annoying as fuck. And I hate that. And, nowadays everyone's like, oh, those people are racist or they're Cootie Gat was a great actor. I loved him in Sex Education. But you know what? I don't think that the writers did him any favors in Doctor Who. They leaned into the Cootie Gatwa of it all rather than lean into the Doctor Who of it all. And so and you watch this. People, I think this is something that isn't really understood. Longtime lovers of all of this stuff do not hate this stuff because they decide to put it's not that whether it's the reason that people don't like the changes is because it feels like the writers who have the opportunity to do this, they're not doing their jobs. They're not doing the research. They don't know the material as well as their audience does. If the writers don't know the audience, or don't know the material as well as the audience, they can never write well within that IP. Now, you could say, Rob, how was Nicholas Meyer able to come in and make a great movie with Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan? Well, because he talked to Gene Roddenberry. Nicholas Meyer had never seen Star Trek, but Nicholas Meyer was a classically educated person. He was a novelist. He was a playwright. He'd already made the movie Time After Time, which was a story about Jack the Ripper and H.G. Wells, which was interesting because he extrapolated. What a great premise. What would happen if H.G. Wells' time machine from his novel of the same name was real, that he actually built a time machine? And what if Jack the Ripper, who was a contemporary of H.G. Wells, was a friend of his and stole the time machine and went into the future? What would happen? That's an irresistible premise that did not in any way, shape, or form take away from those historical characters or a fictionalization of a historical character. And what it did was it extrapolated on real life and brought science fiction into it and made you believe. The problem is the writers today do not, they're not fans, they're not making it work. So, my core Trek philosophy is TOS is right there. Take us to it in a fun and entertaining way. I agree. But watching it being taken apart as it's being reused is not fun or entertaining for me. I look at this and I'm like, I've done a lot more research and work as a documentarian. I mean, for instance, I spent 3 years of my life making Next Generation and Enterprise documentaries where I talked to the people that made those shows and know what went into it. And what's galling is I don't see half of the thought put into modern Star Trek as was put into Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, or even Enterprise. And it's frustrating. And I know that because I documented the making of those shows for 3 years. That's all I did. So I see the work that should be put into Star Trek not being done. The cast is fantastic, and the technical aspects of the show are more than satisfying. I would agree. The cast is great, and it's too bad the writing sucks so bad. I'm a sucker for a good score. Any juicy score can carry a scene straight into your heart. Jerry Goldsmith and James Horner blessed Star Trek with their scores, but I always felt the scores for the shows were mostly underwhelming. There were exceptions. TNG's Lower Decks, the score over Picard's announcement of Ensign Cito Jax's death, is one of the most moving scores in the whole series. So is the Vulcan tea ceremony music. Terry Matalas imbued Picard Season 3 with the beautiful reinterpretation of earlier film Trek scores. The boy knows just where to tickle us. When I first heard Everyone Wants a Piece of Pike in Episode 1 of Strange New Worlds, the soaring melody playing As Pike rides his horse across the snowy plains, I was genuinely moved and knew I'd struck gold. Yeah, that scene was good. I liked it. Then the show went to hell. The show is beautifully cinematic, blending important scenes with home is where the helm is to add a sense of nobility, optimism, and possibility to these wonderful characters and stories, elements that are required in all good Trek. Well, fuck, man, I didn't quite make it to the 3,550 Latin word count of the Magna Carta. The barons are trying to convince King John in the era of the divine right of kings to limit his royal authority, while I'm trying to convince Robert Meyer Burnett that Strange New Worlds is a worthy addition to the franchise. I'm not sure who had and has the larger hill to climb, but make no mistake, Strange New Worlds is my hill to die on, and I'm happy to do so. It may very well be the last great Star Trek series on television, unless Legacy gets the green light. No, it won't. It won't get the green light. I eagerly await your reply. I'm sure it will come in the form of "I'm wrong, oh well." To steal a line from Jeb Bartlett, as a Democrat, I'm a lifelong holder of minority opinions. I'll still let you park your shuttlecraft beside mine in 2250s era the gunmetal gray Starship Enterprise. Thank you, Eric Skelton. P.S. No, fuck it. That's all. I'm out, sauerkraut. Okay. Now, first of all of that said, I'm going to say something that I really believe. If you like something, do not let my opinion of what you like sway you at all. And don't let my opinion make you angry, and don't think I'm trying to say that you shouldn't like what you like, because you should. See, the thing is, the reason people like things is because everybody has a different background. Everybody's coming to something from a different place. And I would say that I've been filling my head with all of this stuff since I was a little kid. And whether it was the written word, whether it was movies, whether it was TV, like when I was growing up, I watched a lot of bad science fiction and bad horror and bad fantasy. I mean, I fucking went and saw Yor, the Hunter from the Future, in a movie theater. It wasn't good. I like Star Crash. It's not good either, but I like it. But on the other hand, I've also read some of the great science fiction of the age. And one of the things that bothers me about now is I feel that, look, I wouldn't be a brain surgeon without having a lot of experience with brain surgery or anatomy or really understanding all this stuff. I feel now that anybody thinks, if they've watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer, that they're capable of writing science fiction, fantasy, and horror. They're literary genres. And in order to be able to write great science fiction, fantasy, horror, or any, I'm working with Max Allan Collins, who is literally a Mystery Writers of America Grandmaster. And when I talk to Max Allan Collins about the genre, the man is like the Oracle of Delphi of mystery writing. He knows everything just about there is to know about the genre. He's read every author that you could possibly imagine. His knowledge is vast. So if I was going to start, like, I love storytelling. I'm a consumer of storytelling, but I can recognize that Max Allan Collins, his work, especially, and look, you can see if I'm wrong, tell me, bringing his scripts to life, bringing his novel True Detective to life as True Noir, The Assassination of Anton Cermak, has been one of the great joys of my life, because I know I'm working with a master writer. I know I'm working with a guy who's written literally hundreds of books. The man knows of what he speaks and knows of what he writes. And when he writes something, it's amazing because he has an incredible depth of knowledge of not just the genre, but storytelling in general. Star Trek has been around for a very long time. It is frustrating for me to watch people working in my favorite IP, especially since 2017 when Discovery debuted, that don't know that very IP. And it's daunting, I understand, but the problem is, so what they end up doing is they're bringing generic storytelling tropes. And look, the original Star Trek brought in generic storytelling tropes too. But what they did do was they gave us a tapestry of characters that we'd never met before. We recognized them. Even Gene Roddenberry said Star Trek was wagon train to the stars because Westerns were really big on TV. But the people that made that show had life experience. They were men of letters. women, DC Fontana, came in. I mean, you had one person creating the Vulcan culture, essentially. And you had people that were learned, and Gene Roddenberry was a World War II vet. He was a cop. So he brought that sensibility to, and, he'd written shows like Have Gun Will Travel. Had a lot of experience. And I feel now we're getting shortchanged. And now we're in a golden age of TV. I watch things like I talked about, Mad Men, Breaking Bad, Sopranos. I mean, take your pick. We lived through the first 5 seasons of Game of Thrones, whatever. Your mileage may vary. The first 4 seasons of X-Files. We've had some great television that we're watching, so we know what great TV is. Star Trek should be the Tiffany standard of science fiction on TV. If they were going to bring back Star Trek to TV now in the 2017s, we should have had writing that was as good as Breaking Bad, that was as good as The Sopranos, that was as good as Mad Men. We should have that. We don't. And that's what bothers me. Because people do not take the sense memory, the public imagination of what Star Trek is a Gorn sitting next to William Shatner in a TV commercial. Or it's William Shatner going, "Get a life." Or it's John Belushi or it's as Captain Kirk, or it's Jim Carrey in Living Color as Captain Kirk. It's what's happened is Star Trek itself isn't taken seriously by modern writers. It's a campy show from the past, and I would love it. Look, what I want out of Star Trek is to see something, to have the seriousness and the thoughtfulness. And the way that Andor treats the Star Trek or Star Wars universe, I would like to see an Andor-like portrayal. Now, a lot of people don't like Andor because it's leaned into the war side of the stars rather than the Jedi Knights and the lightsabers. But the funny thing is Star Wars and Empire, while there was a taste of the Jedi, were more on the war side of things. You had a lot of philosophy, but if you look at Star Wars and Empire, which, by the way, there's an argument to be made that Star Wars and Empire, that was a certain level that even Jedi was a step down from, that Star Wars has never been as good. Rogue One appears to be on the same level, but it's really kind of not, even though, Gilroy was involved with it. But still, these are just opinions, but it's difficult because as generations move on, people like different things. I'm not going to pillory somebody or get mad at somebody because they grew up in a different time than I did. Kids today, people don't read books. They just don't read books. And I can't expect somebody. You have people that are working in a literate genre, which science fiction and fantasy and horror are, that are illiterate when it comes to that genre that they're working in. It's very funny. I love watching people rediscovering like Dune. Well, Dune's been there since the mid-'60s. You could have picked those books up and enjoyed Frank Herbert's 6 Dune books at any time, but you didn't. So a movie comes along that captures the imagination. David Lynch's deeply flawed movie, then there was the Sci-Fi Channel miniseries, but people watch Dune 1 and 2, and you have a guy like Denis Villeneuve bring in modern technology and make these films that are these overwhelming sensory experiences, and suddenly everybody rediscovers what has been there on the page for a long time. That's what I want to see happen to Star Trek. I want to see somebody coming in, and I'm not making it say, like Dune. And I think, to me, the closest thing that I would say, and it is only now being reevaluated, was Star Trek the Motion Picture. Star Trek the Motion Picture was the most Star Trek of the Star Trek in terms of the way I thought about it, because there's episodes of Star Trek like the Doomsday Machine, like the Immunity Syndrome, the serious episodes of Star Trek that aren't people's favorites. People like the juicy, entertaining versions of Star Trek. But I took Star Trek very seriously, and everybody comes to things differently. What I want is intelligence, and I want people that are great writers, that are dealing with great subjects, that are dealing with heady topics, that have something to say about the human condition, not people being turned into fucking Vulcans and making fun of Spock. I'm tired of seeing adolescent Star Trek. Discovery was like the drama club in my high school. It was pretentious, and everybody was talking about their feelings, and the stories were terrible, and they were more interested in furthering I don't know what. But no crying on the bridge. There's no crying in Star Trek. And if there is crying in Star Trek, it's because it's Spock and it's shocking. So, I mean, that's all I want. I want great, smart entertainment that's well written, well directed, and well conceived of. I don't want people coming in and wrecking our franchises, and we see it over and over again. And the reason is the writing isn't good. That's all. The writing isn't good. Why are you making at the beginning of The Last Jedi a telephone joke? I'm on hold. Why are you doing that? Why are you bringing a colloquialism into Star Wars? Why are you doing that? Making some I'm on hold joke. I mean, you watch that and you're like, wait a minute, that's a our universe joke. That's not a Star Wars universe joke. You know, the thing is, in a science fiction show, the situation makes it humorous. It's not at the expense of your characters. And if you do that, I mean, look, there's a scene in Star Trek IV that I can't stand. When Uhura and Chekhov, who both went to Starfleet Academy in San Francisco, are in San Francisco, and they don't know where Alameda is. Where's Alameda? Now, you could say maybe because after the Third World War or something, Alameda wasn't there anymore, but they would know. They would know their way around San Francisco. And I know it was a cheap joke, but it bothers me because it is a joke that is at the expense of our characters instead of making it funny, like when Kirk says, double dumbass on you. Weren't those a gift from Dr. McCoy? They will be again. That's the beauty of it. What does it mean, exact change? All of that stuff is funny. It's situational humor. But when you're doing things at the expense of the characters, making them look stupid for a joke, that's bad writing. At least in my own opinion. Now, if you love Strange New Worlds, I don't want to tell you that you shouldn't. And you should. If you like Strange New Worlds, if it works for you, great. I'm never going to tell you it shouldn't. Although I think everything wrong with American culture is pretty much exemplified by where Star Trek has been since 2009. And I say that kind of humorously. I'm kind of being sarcastic. But if you really think about it, the dumbing down of America, you don't have to look any further than what's happened to Star Trek to see how America has been dumbed down. And when I say dumbed down, once we started teaching for the test, we have to get money for this from the school board. We have to make sure that our test scores are. What do test scores have to do with how people can think? Critical thinking. Kids are. How many articles do you have to read about kids going to college and having never read a book? Because no one's holding their feet to the fire anymore. No one's demanding they learn. School used to be really hard. It wasn't just social. You had to learn. You had to be responsible for learning. You had a great base of education. You know, if they had social media back when I was in high school and somebody was like, tell me where the Atlantic Ocean is, not one person I went to school with wouldn't have been able to tell you where it was. But nowadays we celebrate on social media how fucking dumb the youth of America is. Why do we do that? Why don't we demand more from people? The world is more complex and more intertwined than it's ever been, and we're celebrating mediocrity. Why do we do that? Why do we not demand excellence? Why do we not demand people step up and learn and be the best they can be? That's what America used to be. You know, now it's like we celebrate mediocrity. Why do we do that? Star Trek is a perfect example. Star Trek is a mediocre franchise now. It has been dumbed down and turned into I don't know what. But I'll tell you something. The reason why there's not a huge new fan base for Star Trek is because it's not smart. It's because it's not aspirational. Because the people that are making Star Trek want to see themselves in Star Trek. When I was a little kid and I loved Star Trek, I saw people I aspired to be. I saw people that I was not. I saw people that I imagined that maybe one day with enough hard work. Star Trek was about elite people, the smartest people literally in the universe. They were the only people that would be on those starships. And that was my favorite show. And that's why I identified with. Not because they had the same problems that I had. No. I want to watch something that's aspirational. I want to watch people that are better than I am. People that know more than I do. People that are making smart decisions in difficult situations. People that I can admire. I mean, admittedly, they don't exist. But you want them to exist. And you want to be one of them. That's what I wanted to be when I was a kid, when I was watching at 5 years old, when I was watching Twilight Zone, when I was watching Star Trek, when I was watching Outer Limits, when I was watching War of the Worlds, when I was watching When Worlds Collide, when I was watching Forbidden Planet, when I was watching Destination Moon, when I was watching Conquest of Space, when I was watching Day the Earth Stood Still, or the classic Universal Monster movies. All of these things made me want to be a better person, to be smarter, to learn as much as I could about the world around me. Nowadays, there's not much of that. Now I can make a meme. Look at my meme. But nobody knows anything anymore. Nobody thinks deeply about anything anymore. Think how we're part of the same tribe. I believe what you believe, and our belief systems are about as deep as one sentence. It's really frustrating. And Star Trek to me is so indicative of that. And, it's just depressing because nobody is going to watch Star Trek. They're not going to watch modern Star Trek today, and they're not going to go, you know what, I want to become an engineer because of Mr. Scott. In a clutch, that guy could always fix those warp engines and get us the hell out. Why? Because he was that fucking smart. That's why people liked him. Geordi LaForge, engineer on the Enterprise. Same deal. People wanted to aspired to be Geordi LaForge because he was an engineer that could, in a clutch, get the Enterprise wherever it had to go, or get it out of where it was going to go. I mean, the great thing about Star Trek was it was about really smart people doing really smart things in really smart ways. And it was always aspirational. Now you have a bunch of dumb fucks on a starship that can't wait to go have a meal with their captain. And why does the captain, why are ensigns, why are these characters coming over to his cabin? Why? Where's the sense of decorum? Where's the believability? And the reason that it's not believable is because the people writing the show don't know how to do that. Because they don't believe in that. They don't believe in military discipline. Drives me fucking crazy. See what happens? I haven't even finished this glass of water. Anyway, I started out doing the show about one thing and it started, I don't even know who's watching the show. Let me see if anybody sent in super chats. I don't even know. Charlotte C sent me in a super sticker, a $10 super sticker with a little heart and a cute fox. Thank you for that. Darth Plato says the letter's lack of critical thinking is disturbing. Charlotte C says, Rob, is this Australian? Rob, quiet voice. Ursula Le Guin, it's okay. Keep things secret. It's past, present, but no, don't let them know now. Don't let them now. Look, Ursula K. Le Guin, Left-Handed Darkness, Lathe of Heaven. One of my favorite science fiction movies of all time is A Lathe of Heaven. And people go, is that the one with James Caan? I'm like, oh. Yes, that was a remake, or it's a readaptation. Kenneth Crayley Jr. says, Rob, I'm excited for James Gunn's Superman. I hope it's good to great. I think it will be good. I think it will be good to great. I hope the movie has the heart and the hope and humanity that Superman represents. I think it will. I'm really excited for Superman. Jason Webster says, movies can endure as an art form. Studios need to focus on good storytelling with characters that resonate, rein in budgets, and scale back sequels. Look, I agree with you. I think the problem is it's an economic one. I mean, movies are product. And now the paradigm of what that product and how that product is made has changed. I mean, that's really what we're dealing with, is that the economics of movies have changed and they're being made for a global marketplace. And by definition, they have to appeal to that global marketplace. But, other than that, yeah. Well, anyway, before I say something too controversial, I can't believe I went off on a Star Trek rant tonight. I didn't think I was going to do that. I thought I was just going to read that letter. I couldn't help myself. But I do want to thank Eric. Eric Skelton wrote that letter. I hope, Eric, if you're doing your paper route now, I hope you're not too mad at me. But it was a good letter. And you can always send me letters if you want at rmburnett1701@gmail.com. And put in the subject matter, Robservations letter, or Let's Get Physical Media letter, or if you want to send Israel a letter, the Otaku Experience. Anyway, I'm going to go. Tomorrow I'm going to have episode 8 of True Noir will be dropping this weekend, and I will be finishing it tomorrow, and episode 9 and 10 will follow. And then we'll be done. And then I hopefully will have some exciting True Noir news for you soon. But good things are happening. as Dr. Dealgood. Well, no, no, it wasn't Dr. Dealgood. Dr. Dealgood was the guy in Thunderdome. But one guy did say, one of my favorite things in any movie was in Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, where something was going to happen or things were. One guy says to Max Rockatansky, when he saw Max come in, he goes, "Dice are rolling," which I always thought that was a good thing. Something's going to happen. Dice are rolling. I've never heard anybody say that outside. See, another character saying something that I remember. I mean, you're just a raggedy man. Come on. Anyway, on that note, I'm going to say goodnight to everybody. I want to say thanks to everybody who generously supports this channel via super chats and tips. Thank you very much. We are going to have a cool Midnight Metal. I will be back tomorrow, I promise. I don't know if there is any, if anybody, I know Darth Plato is here. I hope he kept all of you on the straight and narrow. Tom Jr. Jackson probably is going to wake up tomorrow and go, "Wait, I didn't know you were going on." I'm like, I didn't know either. So anyway, this was a fun show. It's always a fun show. You guys are the best. Thanks for watching. And I'm not on Campy tomorrow. I'm going to LA. I'm going to Private Island, and I'm going to mix True Noir Episode 8, Too Long at the Fair, that has a prize fight in it and action scenes. So we'll see. And you know, I wouldn't be able to talk such shit about storytelling if I myself was not making stories. So True Noir is available at truenoir.co. And there's 2 more episodes left. It's a 10-chapter, fully immersive audio drama written by Mystery Writers of America Grandmaster Max Allan Collins, based on the first of his 19-novel series about private eye detective Nathan Heller, True Detective. It's called True Noir, The Assassination of Anton Cermak, and it's set in 1932 and 1933. I'm very proud of it. It's probably the thing that I've done where I feel I've succeeded in providing the most complete version of what it was we were trying to make. And it has an incredible cast. Bill Sadler, like I said, from, Section 31. Katie Sackhoff is in it. The great Michael Rosenbaum is the star. Bill Smitrovich is in it, who I love because he starred in Crime Story. He was also in the Deep Space Nine episode Past Tense. The great Jeffrey Combs, Shran, and Wayoon himself, Dr. Herbert West, is in it. Barry Bostwick, who was in the Rocky Horror Picture Show. He plays FDR. Patton Oswalt plays Dipper Cooney, a pickpocket and criminal. David Strathairn plays Frank Nitti. Anthony LaPaglia plays Al Capone. I mean, come on. It's a murderer's row of people. And if you watch the John Campea show, Chris Carr plays Marianne Beam. Anyway, on that note, I will say everything is great. Everything Everywhere All at Once. No, I don't know what I was going to say. What I was going to say is every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And I think now more than ever, that becomes truer on a daily basis. So everybody take care and read some great books. And if you want, listen, like if you haven't read Dan Simmons' Hyperion Cantos, if you haven't read Hyperion or Fall of Hyperion, dig in. I know that I've always recommended those books, but it's basically the Canterbury Tales in space. And there's pilgrims, there's a great monster, there's a great technology, there's all they're delicious books. If you want to read a cyberpunk novel, that's probably the best cyberpunk novel ever written. It's a little dated, but it is equally delicious. Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash. If you've never, I'm telling you, Snow Crash, the first page, the main character in Snow Crash is named Hero Protagonist, Hiro. And he delivers pizzas on his rocket-powered skateboard, Uncle Enzo's Pizzas. But it's one of the most interesting, entertaining books I've ever read. If you like Ready Player One, Snow Crash is the PhD version of Ready Player One. But another great book is, as I've said, Peter Watts' Blind Sight. Blind Sight. Read Blind Sight. If you want to read it is kind of a time travel story, read Ken Grimwood's Replay. I always recommend these. I've been recommending these books. But by the way, don't read anything about what Replay is about. Just read it. And if you want to read a cool horror novel that not a lot of people talk about, Glenn Duncan's The Last Werewolf, which is really, it became a trilogy, but when I read it, it was not a trilogy. But it's really cool if you like those kinds of stories. The Last Werewolf by Glenn Duncan is a banger. And if you want to read a great horror novel that is epic in scope, Dan Simmons wrote a book called Carrion, like carrion, what you would like what a crow, Carrion, Carrion Comfort. That's a good one. I have to look around and see. Oh, and Robert Charles Wilson. Robert Charles Wilson is like the Stephen King of hard sci-fi. He takes hard sci-fi concepts and brings them right down to earth. And he's a great author. You can read Spin is a good book of his. So check that out. Yeah. And on that note, and if you really want to read an entertaining book, and I found out when the movie's coming out, Andy Weir, who wrote The Martian, his latest book is Project Hail Mary. Ryan Gosling stars in the movie that comes out in March next year, March 2026. Look, it's an easy reading. It's not like young adult, but it's easy to read. It's a great science fiction novel. It's my most eagerly awaited movie right now. That's been that and the Francis Lawrence's adaptation of The Long Walk, Stephen King's story, The Long Walk, and also Mike Flanagan's Life of Chuck. I think that's going to surprise people. If you haven't read that Stephen King short story, the movie's coming out. They dropped a trailer for it today. It stars Tom Hiddleston. Check that out. And Black Mirror, the new season of Black Mirror is coming out. Watch that trailer too. And on that note, I'm going away. Good night.